Okay, so I'm now returning, talking about chapter 11 chapter 9 on organizing your speech. And as I said, anything I previously covered in the speech video using the marker board, I will just mention and then move on. So in this speech, we want to think about organizing. Now, I love to be organized. I'm not always organized. If you go in my office, on the one hand, all my books are organized according to, since they're mainly Bible study books, they are in commentaries, and then they are in New Testament studies and so they're pretty organized. If you look at my desk and my work table, you'll see a big pile of mess. So ideally, I love to be organized. I just don't always get there. But anyway, in your speeches, you absolutely want to be organized for your speech, because it will, first of all, it will help you in preparing and organizing your speech. You will be happier that you are organized. Second, an organized speech is a more memorable speech. Your goal, remember, is not just for you to do a great job, although we want to do that, but the primary job in public speaking is to convey information to an audience or to persuade an audience. And the more organized you are in your information or persuasion, the more impact it will have on the audience. And that really is the bottom line. A communicator should not simply think, what about me? How did I look? How did I sound? Although that's important. And in a public speaking class where we're trying to nail down some of those skills and develop them, we focus on that a little bit more. But I always want you to remember, it's not about you, it's about your audience and you impacting them positively through your presentation. So get that, in your head. That's number one, task number one. That's one of the reasons we organize. Okay, so we want to start by talking about the main points of your speech that make up the body of your speech, beginning and ending. Not right now, don't worry about those, but the main points, because they provide that structure, that skeleton for your speech. So main points, we talked about the numbers. 2 to 5 is what the textbook says. I mentioned 3 is a better number, in my opinion. I refer it to like Goldilocks. Remember Goldilocks? And the 3 bears. Not too much, not too many main points, not enough main points, but just right at 3. So I'm suggesting 3. You cannot go wrong. But just remember, so each main point that you have in a certain given amount of time, if you have 3 main points, you're going to have about 1.5 minutes per point. More points means less content you can put into each main point, because you have to divide that time across a greater number of main points. 5 main points, it just seems like too many to me, but I've done it before. So just realize you're going to feel like you may be skimming stones across a lake if you have too many main points and don't have enough time to provide any depth to those points. So, okay. Well, I think kind of where we left off was with the ordering of speeches. Now, in your speeches, I'm just going to mention 3 of them right now. There are several others. When it comes to our persuasive speeches, I'll probably come back and mention them again. But I'm just going to talk about 3 right now. And again, it's strategic. And in your persuasive speech, you're going to find that the order that you do your main points has a greater impact on how people are persuaded. Here, we're just trying to help people, give them something mentally to understand and provide clarity. So I'm going to talk about 3 different methods. First of all, I'm going to talk about the chronological method. A chronological method, it goes well with your speeches on how to, first, second, and third. It might work well with a chronological speech about an event, a landing on the moon. Here's what happened on the day of takeoff. Here's what happened during the travel time. Here's what happened on the landing. And here's what happened on the way home. And here's what happened when they crashed in the ocean. Well, they didn't crash, landed in the ocean. But anyway, so it follows an order of logic. If you're going to tell us how to do something, how to change a tire, first you do this, second you do this, third you do this. Makes sense, right on. Okay, second is, and you use those with informative speeches and as well as process speeches. You could do them with event speeches. You definitely don't want to do chronological with a concept speech. It just doesn't fit. Second is spatial. Spatial is an interesting method because you're kind of giving us a mental guided tour of your topic. Weather patterns across the United States: Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, Pacific Northwest, Southwest. If you're talking about the parts of an atom, you're probably going to have PowerPoint up on the board, and you're going to show us a picture of the nucleus, the protons, I don't know, neutrons, Jimmy Neutron, whatever. But you're going to give us that guided tour. And so depending on your topic, usually an informative speech on an object speech works out really well. You could do one on, for example, battles from the Civil War. What happened in this battle? What happened in this area and this place and over here and over there? So that might work out really well. I'm going to talk about the other ones later. But the one I want to talk about is the topical order. This is what I call the Swiss knife method of organizing your speech, your main points, because it can be used with anything. Abstract speeches, concept speeches, topical order. Object speeches, yes, probably not how-to speeches because you would want to use a chronological order there, but everything else topical. It's basically telling us three points about your topic. 3 facts about the moon. 3 phases of Picasso's his blue phase, his whatever phases he goes into. 3 types of modern art: Cubism, Dadaism, and Pointillism. That's not modern, but anyway. And notice all these topics that I talk about quite often, it's because I've listened to speeches. I did take an art appreciation class back in 1981. Summer course, so I could graduate on time. But anyway, learn from speeches. So use that for a topical speech for about anything. And here I've already touched on in our previous video, keeping your points separate. Second is use the same pattern of the wording. I've talked about that. Third, balance the length of your main points. We've talked about that. But now I want to talk about supportive material. This is material that will help your speech make sense to your audience. And the one we want to talk about is what are called connectives. Connectives, I'm going to read this, are words or phrases used in the speech that show the relationship between the different parts of your speech. And the big one I want to talk about, you can read about the others, is transitions. I think transitions really, really help a speech along. So instead of a silent pause when you change topics from pointillism to cubism in modern art, you're going to say something like, so now that we've talked about pointillism, let's switch over to talk about cubism, which I never quite got, but whatever. What I like the best is where you don't just finish talking about pointillism and say, okay, so now my second point, I'm going to talk about cubism. What I think is a better, you can do that and that's fine, but what's better is what I consider building a complete bridge. You first tell us, this is all in the transition, you first tell us what you've just been telling us. So now that we've talked about pointillism, right? This is Degas and, anyway. So you talk about pointillism. So we know you're done with that. You're very clear that we finished talking about pointillism. Whatever else we're going to do, we're not talking about pointillism anymore. And then you say, and now we're going to talk about cubism. It's a complete bridge. You've told us what you've done with, and we're on the bridge over, and you land us exactly on the other side of the ravine to talk about cubism. I know what we're done with. Now I know where we are going. That, in my opinion, is a great transition. You could just say, first, we're going to talk about this and then talk about it. Then second, we're going to talk about this and then talk about it. And third, my last main point is this. So that's fine, but I just think there is a better way to do it. They also mention internal previews, internal summaries, which are just brief mentions of what you've, an internal preview is just a sub point about what you're talking about next. Internal summaries are telling us briefly, but it's still within the same main point. Then signposts are giving us, to keep us mindful of where we are, or even the use of questions. Although I think the use of questions you can use questions actually as your transitions. So, talking about pointillism, for example, to say, so how many of you know what a main type of painting was practiced in the mid-1800s? I'm making this up as I go. And people will raise their hands, and that is a transition to your next main point. So you can use questions as transitions as well. The nice thing about asking questions in a speech, it integrates the audience to participate at some level. Even if it's just raising a hand, that is encouraging them to participate in your presentation, which keeps them connected, which helps them remember, which helps them like you better and feel more connected with the speaker, and that all helps them to enjoy the speech, get more out of the speech, and to remember the speech. Okay, so that is all I'm going to say about that. I covered quite a bit of this chapter already on the board, so I'm going to stop right there.